Hey there, Saints. Pastor Dave here with another weekly devotional this Wednesday. I'm going to read again from the Message translation from Matthew 13, which we started last week. We heard one of Jesus' parables and kind of the explanation of what parables are for. We're going to continue with another farming parable today. He told another story. God's kingdom is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. That night, while his hired men were asleep, his enemy sowed thistles all through the wheat and slipped away before dawn. When the first green shoots appeared and the grain began to form, the thistles showed up too. The farmhands came to the farmer and said, "Master, that was clean seed you planted, wasn't it? Where did these thistles come from?" He answered, "Some enemy did this." The farmhands asked, "Should we weed out the thistles?" He said, "No. If you weed the thistles, you'll pull up the wheat too. Let them grow together until harvest time. Then I'll instruct the harvesters to pull up the thistles and tie them in bundles for the fire. Then gather the wheat and put it in the barn." Saints, this is a parable about good and evil. It's a parable about the world that we live in and kind of the explanation for why things aren't the way that they ought to be. We know from the Genesis story that when God created in the beginning, everything was good. Everything was as God designed. Everything worked as intended. God looked around at the end of each day of creation and said, "This is good." But the world we live in now doesn't always reflect that goodness, does it? The world that we live in now, we know, is full of weeds and thorns and thistles. It's full of things that are difficult and painful and broken and just not the way that God intended them to be. Why? In Jesus' story, there is another force that works against God. There's an enemy that sows this bad seed among the good seed that the farmer had sown. In spiritual terms, we would call that the devil, who is sowing sin into the world, who is introducing this disobedience and this rebellion to us human beings. And so now, as a result of that, bad things are growing up amid the good that God created. We've got wars, we've got famines, we've got hatred, we've got injustice, we've got all sorts of bad results, along with the beauty of creation that we do still see. The challenge for us is what to do now. I mean, how can we respond to this evil? The farmhands in the story want to start pulling weeds, and that might be a natural response for us. We want to start sorting out the bad from the good. We want to start segregating and pushing away the bad and preserving a safe space for the good. But the farmer says you can't do that. There's no way to tell one from the other. In fact, in the original Greek, the word that describes the thorny growth, the thistles, is zizanian, which is a specific type of plant. It's called darnel wheat. And as darnel wheat begins to grow, it's basically indistinguishable from real wheat. What Jesus is saying through this parable is that you can't always tell the difference between good and evil. For human beings, that's maybe a little bit above our pay grade. And we need to allow God to be the one who acts in judgment. We need to leave God that job of determining what is according to plan and what is not. Which means we're in kind of a frustrating wait and see time. We're in a time that calls for our patience to allow certain things to grow, even though we don't think they ought to be allowed to grow, because God knows what God is doing. And God knows that in the end, good can be separated from bad. But to harm the bad right now might also harm the good. That's difficult. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, but it is something that we have to be able to accept. God knows what God is doing. Saints, that's our devotional this week. As hard as it might be, I hope it's worth thinking about. I hope it brings a little bit of peace to an otherwise challenging situation. Hope you are doing well and staying healthy, and I'll be praying for you. I hope you'll keep praying for me, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, saints.